"No man wants me," said the poor black waitress as she accidentally witnessed a brutal execution. "I will marry you right now," the Mafia boss declared, sliding an emerald ring onto her finger by dawn. She thought he was just silencing a witness, becoming his prisoner in a mansion of luxury and danger. But the truth was darker. He'd been watching her for months before that night, obsessed with her for reasons she couldn't understand. When gunmen attack during their wedding, she takes a bullet meant for his niece, earning unexpected respect in his dangerous world. As she learns to survive among killers, she discovers shocking connections between her mysterious past and his bloody vendetta. Her father's murder 12 years ago wasn't random. The evidence he hid before dying could destroy an empire built on human trafficking, evidence only she can find. Was she really just a waitress in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was this forced marriage part of a deadly game planned long before they met? And as bullets fly and passion ignites, will her heart betray her before her captor becomes her savior, or will loving a monster be the death of them both? Alexandria's feet screamed with every step as she pushed through Bellissimo's heavy glass doors. The gleaming marble foyer mocked her scuffed shoes, a reminder of another bill she couldn't afford to fix. 15 minutes late, again. "Third time this month, Johnson." Marcus, the floor manager, intercepted her before she could reach the locker room. His face was flushed red with irritation. "One more slip-up and you're done. I don't care how long you've been here." "The bus was late. I'm sorry," she muttered, fingers fumbling with her apron strings. Her shoulders ached from yesterday's double shift, but she couldn't show weakness. Not here. "Sorry doesn't keep our 5-star rating." He thrust a stack of menus at her chest. "Table 7's been waiting." Alexandria pasted on her practiced smile, the one that hid 3 years of swallowed pride and mounting debts. The dining room sparkled with crystal glasses and fine china, filled with Chicago's elite who looked through her like she was made of glass. During her break, she huddled in the cold alley behind the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Please, there has to be something we can work out," she whispered to her mother's hospice nurse. "I get paid Friday." "Miss Johnson, we've already extended payment terms twice. Without the next installment, we'll have to transfer your mother to state care." Her throat tightened. "Just 3 more days. I promise." Back inside, Alexandria moved efficiently between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing plates. Her invisibility was almost an advantage as conversations flowed freely around her. "The zoning board's in our pocket. Merger goes through next week. Did you hear about the Barone family's latest move?" The staff's nervous energy was palpable as they prepared the private dining room. Mr. Costello's reservation had everyone on edge, though Alexandria had never seen him herself. "Everything must be perfect," Marcus stressed, checking the place settings for the 5th time. "Mr. Costello doesn't tolerate mistakes." When Amy called in sick, Alexandria didn't hesitate to accept the closing shift. Extra hours meant extra tips, and she needed every penny. Her feet might be killing her, but her mother's care mattered more than comfort. Near midnight, Marcus handed her the keys. "Lock up after Mr. Costello's party leaves, and make sure that private room sparkles." "Got it." Alexandria nodded, already calculating how long it would take to polish every surface to perfection. The main dining room was empty as she wiped down the bar, the clink of glasses echoing in the silence. She assumed the private party had left through the separate exit, until a crash shattered the quiet. Alexandria froze, dish rag suspended mid-wipe. It came from the private dining room. Someone could be hurt, or drunk. Either way, she should check. The door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling onto the carpet. Alexandria approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt if it was just a guest who'd had too much wine. Through the crack, she saw 2 men, one kneeling, hands raised in desperate supplication. The other standing, tall and imposing in a perfectly tailored suit, dark hair like a raven's wing. "Please," the kneeling man sobbed. "I can explain. You betrayed the family, Marco." The standing man's voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried an arctic chill that made Alexandria's blood freeze. There's nothing left to explain. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but her body wouldn't move as she watched him raise a gun. Its silencer glinting in the chandelier's light, a small gasp escaped her lips before she could stop it. The gunshot was barely more than a whisper, but the thud of the body hitting carpet seemed to shake the building's foundation. Alexandria's heart stopped as the killer's head snapped toward the door, steel-gray eyes locking with hers through the narrow gap. Those eyes held no warmth, no mercy, only deadly calculation as they pinned her in place. She'd spent years being invisible, but now she'd never been more seen in her life. The door began to swing open. Alexandria's legs finally remembered how to move, She spun and ran, her worn shoes silent on the plush carpet as adrenaline overwhelmed exhaustion. The main dining room's exit was closest. If she could just reach it, heavy footsteps followed, unhurried but inexorable. Like a predator who knew his prey, couldn't escape. "Stop." His voice rolled through the darkness like distant thunder. Alexandria's feet refused to move as the door swung open fully, revealing the killer in his entirety. Blood dotted his crisp white shirt like macabre confetti, the metallic scent mixing with his expensive cologne. His expression shifted from murderous to intrigued as he studied her face, head tilting slightly like a predator assessing unusual prey. Two men materialized from the shadows, weapons trained on her head. Alexandria's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to stand straight. Years of hardship had taught her dignity was sometimes all you had left. "I won't beg," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Just make it quick." Salvatore's eyebrows rose fractionally. He raised one hand, and his men immediately lowered their weapons, though they remained alert. "Interesting," he murmured, beginning to circle her with measured steps. "Most people plead for their lives, but not you, Alexandria Johnson." She flinched at his use of her name. He shouldn't know it. "Tell me," he continued, "why does someone with your intelligence waste time serving entitled fools their overpriced pasta?" "Bills don't pay themselves," she answered, figuring honesty couldn't make her situation worse. "And medical care is expensive." "Ah, yes, your mother's stage 4 cancer treatment." He stopped in front of her. Quite the burden for a waitress's salary. Cold fear sliced through her. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know everything about people who interest me." His men worked efficiently behind him, removing all evidence of the murder. 3 years at Bellissimo, no close friends, no romantic relationships, just work and caring for your mother. Such dedication. "Why are you prolonging this?" Alexandria demanded. "If you're going to kill me, I'm considering an alternative solution." He pulled out his phone, dialing swiftly. His Italian was fluid and commanding, the conversation brief. "Here's my proposal," he said after hanging up. "You'll marry me immediately. Your silence will be guaranteed by your position as my wife. You'll become my property in every way." "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. His smile was cold. "Your alternatives are simple. Death here and now, or watching your mother lose her medical care and die slowly in state hospice. Choose carefully. You have 5 minutes." Alexandria's mind raced as she watched his men methodically sanitize the crime scene. Marriage to this murderer or death, both options terrified her. But her mother's face floated before her eyes, already gaunt from chemotherapy. How could she condemn her to a painful end in some underfunded facility? The minutes ticked by like hours. Through the windows, dawn painted the Chicago skyline in shades of pink and gold. A beautiful morning that felt like a mockery of her situation. "Time's up," Salvatore announced. He produced an ornate ring, emeralds glinting in the early light. "Your decision?" Alexandria swallowed hard. "I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, the metal cold against her skin. His touch lingered, possessive and threatening at once. "The car is waiting, wife." Her legs felt disconnected from her body as she followed him outside. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, engine purring quietly in the empty street. Everything she owned, her apartment, her few possessions, her whole life, lay in the opposite direction. But there would be no goodbyes, no chance to collect even a change of clothes. One of the men opened the vehicle's door. Alexandria hesitated for a fraction of a second, reality crashing over her. In the space of an hour, she'd become a witness, a prisoner, and a bride. The emerald ring felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "After you," Salvatore said softly, his hand settling on the small of her back. The gentle touch carried an unmistakable warning. Alexandria climbed into the SUV's dark interior, the leather seats still cold from the night air. As Salvatore slid in beside her, she caught a final glimpse of Bellissimo's facade before the door closed with a decisive thunk. The SUV glided through massive iron gates that rose like ancient guardians against the morning sky. Alexandria pressed closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass as an estate. Straight from a movie revealed itself. Manicured gardens stretched endlessly, broken only by elegant pathways and sculpted hedges. A fountain dominated the circular driveway, water sparkling in the early light. The mansion loomed ahead, its limestone facade making Alexandria feel increasingly insignificant with each passing second. 3 stories of architectural grandeur towered over her as the vehicle came to a stop. Silent security personnel materialized, opening doors with practiced efficiency. Salvatore exited first, already engaged in rapid Italian conversation on his phone, his previous intensity toward her replaced by total dismissal now that he'd secured his prize. A stern-faced woman in a pressed black dress approached. "This way," she directed, her accent thick but clear. "I am Julia, the housekeeper. I have served the Costello family for 30 years. Alexandria followed her through imposing double doors into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. Marble floors echoed their footsteps as Julia began what felt less like a tour and more like a prison orientation. "The West Wing is strictly forbidden. That's Mr. Costello's private domain. The basement levels are off-limits. The security office is restricted. The kitchen staff begins at 5 a.m. You're not to disturb them. The grounds are accessible between sunrise and sunset, but only with escort." They climbed a sweeping staircase, Julia's rules continuing without pause. Phone calls are monitored. Internet access is restricted. Visitors are not permitted without Mr. Costello's explicit approval. The staff answers to him alone. Do not attempt to circumvent his authority through them. Alexandria's head spun as they moved through opulent hallways, each room more luxurious than the last. Finally, they reached a set of cream-colored doors. "Your suite," Julia announced. "When Mr. Costello doesn't require your presence elsewhere, the staff will attend to your needs within reason." Her expression softened marginally. "It would be wise to accept your position gracefully. Mr. Costello can be generous to those who please him." Left alone, Alexandria explored her gilded cage. The sitting room opened to a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, with a bathroom that belonged in a spa. But it was the walk-in closet that stopped her cold. Rows of designer clothes hung in perfect order. Dresses, pants, blouses, all in her exact size. Shoes lined the walls, and drawers revealed lingerie with tags still attached. The methodical preparation sent chills down her spine. This hadn't been a spontaneous decision. Salvatore had planned this, watching her, waiting. She found the house phone, fingers trembling as she dialed out. Nothing. Restricted, just as Julia had warned. Fighting rising panic, Alexandria forced herself to shower, washing away the nightmare of the previous night. She chose the simplest clothes available, black pants and a white blouse, refusing to feel grateful for their obvious quality. Then she began methodically testing her prison's boundaries. Windows? Sealed. Doors to the balcony? Locked. The hallway remained staffed by a discreet but watchful security presence. Late afternoon sun slanted through the windows when Julia returned. "Mr. Costello requests your presence for dinner. Follow me." The dining room could have seated 20, but only 2 places were set at the massive table. Salvatore stood as she entered, impeccably dressed in a fresh suit with no trace of the morning's violence. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the chair beside his at the head of the table. "I trust you found everything satisfactory?" Alexandria remained standing. "Where's my mother?" "Ah, straight to negotiations." He smiled coolly. "Your mother has been transferred to Chicago Memorial's private wing. The best oncologists in the country are reviewing her case. All expenses are covered. Naturally. For how long? That depends entirely on you." He gestured again to the chair. "Sit, eat. We have details to discuss." She sat stiffly as servers appeared with elaborate dishes. Salvatore discussed her as if reviewing a business acquisition, laying out expectations of her appearance, behavior, and duties as his wife. "The marriage is legally binding," he informed her, between bites of perfectly cooked steak. "Judge Romano filed the paperwork this morning. You'll find everything in order." "And how long do you plan to keep me?" Alexandria forced herself to eat despite her churning stomach. "Keep you?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're my wife, not a temporary arrangement, though your mother's continued care depends on your complete compliance." After dinner, he personally escorted her to her bedroom. Not his, she noted with relief. At her door, he caught her face in his hands with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone as she fought not to flinch. "Don't attempt to escape," he said softly. "My men are everywhere, and Chicago has no hiding place I cannot reach." His grip tightened fractionally before releasing her. "Soon enough, you won't want to leave." The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Alexandria stood frozen until his footsteps faded, then curled up on the massive bed. Despite his warnings, her mind was already calculating angles, timing, possibilities. She might be trapped for now, but she refused to believe it was forever. The mansion's silence pressed against Alexandria's ears as she worked the window latch, her fingers trembling in the darkness. 3 a.m., the quietest hour she'd observed during her first day of captivity. She'd spent hours carefully manipulating the mechanism, using a nail file she'd found in the bathroom. Dressed in the darkest clothes she could find, black leggings and a fitted sweater from her new wardrobe, she eased the window open. Cool night air brushed her face. The ledge outside was wide enough to shimmy along, decorated stonework providing handholds. Years of growing up in Chicago's rougher neighborhoods had taught her how to move unseen. Alexandria pressed herself flat against the wall, analyzing the grounds below. Guards patrolled in predictable patterns, their routes creating gaps in coverage near the eastern wall where shadows gathered thickest. Her heart thundered against her ribs as she lowered herself from the ledge, using decorative columns to climb down. The manicured lawn muffled her footsteps. She stuck to the shadows of trees and hedges, timing her movements between guard rotations, just as she'd done avoiding gang members in her youth. The eastern wall loomed closer. 20 more feet. 15. 10. Alexandria's muscles coiled, ready to sprint for freedom. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life, bathing the gardens in harsh white light. She froze, blinking against the glare. Slow, deliberate applause cut through the night. Salvatore emerged from behind a massive oak tree, his tall frame unfolding from the shadows like a predator revealing itself. "Impressive," he said, continuing his measured clapping. But predictable. His expression held neither anger nor surprise, only a calculating interest that made her stomach clench. "The cameras caught your little lock-picking session hours ago. I wanted to see how far you'd get." Heat flooded Alexandria's cheeks, not just embarrassment at being caught, but fury at his casual amusement. She'd been nothing but entertainment for him. "Come." His hand settled on the small of her back, the touch simultaneously gentle and immovable. Alexandria hated how her body registered his warmth through the thin sweater, hated that she was aware of his proximity at all. Instead of returning her to her room, Salvatore guided her through the house's shadowy corridors to his study. Rich leather and mahogany surrounded them as he settled behind a massive desk, gesturing for her to sit opposite him. He opened a thick file folder, spreading its contents across the polished surface. Alexandria's breath caught as she recognized herself. School photos tracking her growth from pigtailed child to teenager, report cards, medical records, employment history. Her entire life laid bare under his calculating gaze. "Your father's disappearance when you were 12, Salvatore said, tapping a police report. The struggling single mother, working 2 jobs. The straight-A student who couldn't afford college. The dedicated daughter spending every spare penny on her mother's care." His eyes locked with hers. "I know everything about you, Alexandria." "Why?" The question scraped her throat. "Why me?" Instead of answering, he slid another document forward, their marriage certificate, bearing an official seal and judge's signature. "The experimental treatment keeping your mother alive? It comes from a pharmaceutical company the Costello family controls. Your life was in my hands long before you witnessed Marco's unfortunate end." Alexandria stared at the certificate, her new name stark against the cream paper. The sky outside was lightening, dawn approaching as Salvatore finally led her back toward her room. Her mind felt numb, overwhelmed by the scope of his control over her existence. "Rest," he ordered softly. "Tomorrow you'll meet Father Romano and formalize our union in the eyes of God, as well as the law." "No man wants me," Alexandria whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Years of loneliness and rejection welled up. The wealthy men at the restaurant looking through her, the dates who disappeared when they learned about her mother's medical bills, the grinding isolation of poverty. Salvatore's fingers caught her chin, forcing her gaze up to meet his. Something dark and possessive flickered in his eyes. "I will marry you again right now," he declared, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made her shiver. "And I will own every inch of you until you forget there was ever a time you didn't belong to me." He released her and strode away, leaving Alexandria frozen in her doorway. His words hung in the air between them, and she couldn't tell if they were meant as a promise or a threat. The private chapel's stained glass cast colored shadows across Alexandria's cream silk dress, a garment chosen for her like everything else in her new life. The intimate space held only Salvatore's inner circle, their presence more intimidating than a full church of strangers would have been. Father Romano's weathered hands moved through practiced motions of the ceremony, his knowing eyes suggesting he'd blessed many Costello unions of questionable consent. Alexandria wondered how many other brides had stood here, hearts pounding with the same mixture of fear and resignation she felt now. Salvatore commanded the space without effort, his tall frame radiating authority. His men's expressions showed a complex mixture of fear and respect whenever they glanced his way. Alexandria noticed how they wouldn't meet his eyes directly, how they shifted subtly away when he moved. The vows stuck in her throat, but she forced them out, each word feeling like a betrayal of herself. Salvatore's voice was clear and certain as he claimed her as his wife, his tone carrying an edge of satisfaction that made her shiver. The reception unfolded in the mansion's grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers throwing rainbow prisms across marble floors. Alexandria found herself introduced to a parade of Costello family members, each interaction carefully observed by Salvatore's watchful gaze. Gabriella, his younger sister, approached with barely concealed hostility. "I hope you know what you're doing, brother," she said, her eyes raking over Alexandria dismissively. "Sudden marriages rarely end well in our world." Antonio, Salvatore's right-hand man, studied Alexandria with the calculated assessment of someone evaluating a security risk. His handshake was professionally firm, but his eyes never stopped tracking her movements. Only Donatella, Salvatore's widowed aunt, offered genuine warmth. The older woman's smile reached her eyes as she clasped Alexandria's hands. "Welcome to the family, dear one," she said, her gentle tone a stark contrast to the other's suspicion. Throughout the reception, Salvatore's hand remained possessively at Alexandria's waist, his fingers occasionally tightening when someone approached. "My wife," he introduced her repeatedly, each declaration a subtle challenge to anyone who might question his choice. Alexandria observed everything, cataloging potential allies and escape routes even as she played her role. She noticed how conversations stopped when Salvatore neared, how younger family members scurried from his path, how even senior members deferred to his authority. When his phone buzzed with urgent business, Salvatore hesitated before leaving her with Donatella. "Keep my wife company," he instructed, his tone making it clear this was more than a casual request. Once he'd gone, Donatella led Alexandria to a quiet corner. "He's not an easy man," she admitted, "but he protects what's his with everything he has. The community centers in poor neighborhoods, the scholarships for local kids, all Salvatore's work, though he'd never admit it." Alexandria absorbed this unexpected information, trying to reconcile it with the man who'd forced her into marriage at gunpoint. Before she could respond, gunshots shattered the evening's facade of civility. Security personnel materialized instantly, moving with practiced efficiency to protect family members. Salvatore appeared at Alexandria's side, pushing her behind him as chaos erupted. Through the confusion, she spotted Sophia, Gabriella's 7-year-old daughter, running toward them in panic. Time seemed to slow as Alexandria noticed movement behind a marble column. A gunman emerged, his weapon tracking Sophia's movement. Without conscious thought, Alexandria launched herself forward, tackling the child as the shot rang out. Searing pain blazed across her arm as the bullet grazed her. She curled protectively around Sophia, shielding the girl with her body until Salvatore's men neutralized the threat. The entire incident lasted less than a minute. Afterward, Alexandria sat still while a doctor cleaned and bandaged her wound, aware of the charged atmosphere in the room. Salvatore watched from across the space, his expression unreadable but intense. Gabriella clutched Sophia, looking at Alexandria with new eyes, her earlier hostility replaced by something closer to respect. Other family members whispered among themselves, reassessing their judgment of Salvatore's unexpected wife. Alexandria noticed Antonio conferring with security teams, his gaze occasionally drifting to her with puzzled calculation. Donatella simply smiled, as if Alexandria had confirmed something she'd already suspected. The wound throbbed dully as the doctor finished bandaging it. Alexandria's thoughts whirled with the evening's events. The forced ceremony, the family's dynamics, the attack, and her instinctive protection of Sophia. She'd acted without thinking, her body moving on pure protective instinct. Now, sitting quietly under Salvatore's intense scrutiny, she wondered how this would change her position in his world. The ballroom had mostly cleared, though security remained heightened. Sophia clung to her mother but kept stealing glances at Alexandria, her young face showing confusion and gratitude. Gabriella's expression had softened considerably, the earlier disdain replaced by thoughtful consideration, as she watched Alexandria endure the doctor's ministrations without complaint. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains as Alexandria's eyes fluttered open. Her arm throbbed dully, a reminder of last night's violence. She blinked in surprise at the sight of Salvatore slumped in a chair beside her bed, his usual pristine appearance notably disheveled. His dark hair fell across his forehead, suit jacket wrinkled, tie loosened at his throat. The moment he noticed her stirring, he straightened, mask of control sliding back into place. All traces of vulnerability vanished as he adjusted his cuffs with practiced precision. "You're being moved to my suite today," he announced, voice brooking no argument. "Last night proved I can't protect you unless you're within my immediate reach. I don't need Alexandria began. This isn't a discussion. His tone remained level but carried an undercurrent of steel. Within hours, her belongings were transferred to the master suite, a massive space that made her bedroom look modest in comparison. The suite contained several adjoining rooms, offering her privacy while keeping her firmly within Salvatore's domain. The sitting room alone was bigger than her old apartment. Walking the halls, Alexandria noticed increased security throughout the estate. Armed men patrolled the grounds in tight formations. Inside, staff moved with heightened alertness, eyes constantly scanning for threats. She found Gabriella in the conservatory, supervising Sophia's piano practice. The little girl waved shyly before returning to her scales. Gabriella's usual hostility seemed tempered, though wariness remained in her eyes. "I should thank you," Gabriella said stiffly, "for what you did for Sophia. Anyone would have done the same." "No." Gabriella's gaze sharpened. "Most would have frozen, or run. We assumed you were after Salvatore's money, or worse, planted by our enemies." "I didn't choose any of this," Alexandria replied quietly. "Whatever game you're playing, my brother is not a man to be manipulated," Gabriella warned, though the words carried less venom than before. "He may seem controlled, but his temper is legendary when provoked." Later that afternoon, Salvatore insisted on changing Alexandria's bandage himself, dismissing the house doctor. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wound, long fingers careful against her skin. "Who were they?" she asked, watching his face. "The attackers? Likely the Barone family testing our defenses." His jaw tightened. "They've been pushing boundaries lately. So I'm in danger not just from you, but from your enemies too." His hands stilled on her arm. "I'm not your enemy, Alexandria. I'm the only thing standing between you and people who would do far worse than marry you." That evening, Salvatore escorted her to a family dinner. Curious eyes followed them as they entered the formal dining room. Alexandria recognized faces from the wedding, plus additional relatives eager to meet Salvatore's mysterious bride. She observed him throughout the meal, how he shifted seamlessly between personas. He discussed business with cold efficiency, showed unexpected patience with elderly Uncle Marco's rambling stories, and softened noticeably when young cousins sought his attention. The complexity challenged her image of him as simply a monster who'd stolen her freedom. Returning to their suite, Salvatore's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened, knuckles whitening around the device. After hanging up, he ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "Someone leaked information about you to my enemies," he explained, pacing the room. "They know about your mother, your job history, everything." Alexandria's stomach clenched. "What does that mean?" "It means you're an even bigger target now." He stopped in front of her. "From now on, you don't leave my sight. You can't just—" "I can and I will." He stepped closer, dominating her space. Heat radiated from his body as he towered over her. "I've lost too much to carelessness before. I won't lose you too." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning beyond mere possession. Alexandria's breath caught as his fingers traced the bandage on her arm with surprising tenderness. His touch lingered, sending unexpected warmth through her body before he abruptly turned away. She watched him stride to the window, confusion swirling through her mind. Her skin tingled where he'd touched her, and she hated how her body betrayed her with its response. This man had kidnapped her, forced her into marriage, and now kept her prisoner, albeit in a gilded cage. She shouldn't feel anything but revulsion at his touch. Yet something in his words, in the gentle way he'd tended her wound, in his fierce protectiveness of family, made him harder to dismiss as purely evil. The complexity of him, ruthless killer and careful protector, cold businessman and passionate defender, left her increasingly uncertain of her own reactions. Early morning light filtered through the high basement windows as Alexandria faced Salvatore in the mansion's private gym. The space was impressive. Professional equipment lined the walls, and mirrors covered one side completely. The floor was padded with professional-grade mats, making her bare feet sink slightly with each step. "Your stance is too wide," Salvatore said, moving behind her. His hands gripped her hips, adjusting her position. The touch was clinical, but his fingers lingered a heartbeat too long. "An attacker will easily unbalance you like this." Alexandria caught their reflection in the mirror, her in fitted workout clothes, him in expensive athletic wear that did nothing to hide his muscled frame. The contrast between them was stark, her uncertainty against his absolute confidence. "Again," he commanded. "Show me how you'd break free if someone grabs you from behind." She executed the move he'd taught her, but her elbow didn't connect properly. Salvatore caught her arm easily. "Harder," he instructed. In my world, hesitation gets you killed. You're not in that restaurant anymore, where the worst threat was a customer's rudeness. They'd been at this for days now, every morning, 2 hours of training before Salvatore's business duties began. Alexandria had initially resisted, but his argument about survival made frustrating sense. She'd already been shot at once. The routine was becoming familiar, training, then accompanying him to various meetings where she waited in secure rooms, followed by family dinners or business gatherings. Always within his sight, always under his control, yet she found herself studying his operation with growing fascination. They moved through various defensive positions, their bodies drawing closer with each demonstration. Salvatore showed her how to escape different holds, his touch remaining professional despite their proximity. But during a particularly complex move, she ended up pressed against his chest, both breathing hard. Something shifted in the air between them. His hands tightened slightly on her arms, and she felt his heart racing against her back. For a moment, neither moved. Salvatore abruptly stepped away. "That's enough for today," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Get changed. We're visiting your mother." An hour later, they pulled up to Chicago's most exclusive private medical facility. Alexandria's hands trembled as she followed Salvatore through pristine hallways to her mother's suite. The room was beautiful, more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. Her mother looked better than she had in months. "Alex," she called out, smiling. "You look wonderful, darling. Marriage agrees with you." Alexandria hugged her mother tightly, fighting tears as she felt how much stronger she seemed. The experimental treatments were clearly working. Over her head, her mother mouthed, "Thank you," to Salvatore, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Instead of returning to the estate afterward, Salvatore drove them through Chicago's poorest neighborhoods. He pointed out various buildings, a newly renovated community center, blocks of restored affordable housing, a state-of-the-art medical clinic. "All of these," he said quietly, "exist because of Costello money. The police call me a criminal, but who serves these communities better? The government that abandoned them, or the family that protects them?" Alexandria watched children playing in a clean park that bore a small plaque thanking an anonymous donor. The morality she'd thought was black and white began showing shades of gray. That evening, they attended a charity gala at the city's most exclusive hotel. Alexandria, dressed in a designer gown that probably cost more than she'd made in a year at the restaurant, felt like she was playing a part in someone else's life. She froze when she spotted her former manager from Bellissimo, Marcus, fawning over various wealthy patrons. He brushed past her without recognition, the worn-out waitress transformed into someone he'd now try to impress. Salvatore noticed her tension and followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed as he observed Marcus snapping at a young server who'd spilled water. "Antonio," Salvatore called softly. His right-hand man appeared instantly. After a whispered conversation, Antonio smoothly escorted Marcus outside. "What will happen to him?" Alexandria asked. "Nothing permanent," Salvatore replied. "But no one disrespects workers under my protection." Late that night, back at the mansion, Alexandria gathered her courage. "Why did you really choose me?" she asked. "You could have simply eliminated a witness that night." "Why marriage?" Salvatore studied her silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "I've been watching you for months before that night. Your resilience, your dignity despite having nothing." He stepped closer, his presence filling her space. "People think I chose you on impulse after you witnessed Marco's execution. The truth is, I'd already decided you would be mine. The incident merely accelerated my timeline." Alexandria stood frozen, mind reeling. Their meeting wasn't random at all. Salvatore had been watching, waiting, planning. But why? What could have drawn his attention to a simple waitress months before she accidentally witnessed a murder? The questions multiplied in her mind as she stared at him, seeing not just the ruthless Mafia boss, but the complex man who protected communities, and remembered how Marcus had treated her. Alexandria sat across from Salvatore at breakfast, sunlight streaming through tall windows onto the elegant table setting. Her mind still reeled from his confession last night about watching her for months. She studied his face as he read the morning paper, trying to reconcile this composed man with the level of obsession his admission suggested. "If you were watching me for months, prove it," she challenged, breaking the silence. Without looking up from his paper, Salvatore responded with unsettling precision. "You lived in apartment 3B at Cedar Grove, 4th floor walk-up, broken elevator. You'd leave for work at 6:15 a.m., stop at Joe's Coffee Cart on Michigan Avenue. Medium coffee, splash of cream, no sugar." Alexandria's hands tightened around her teacup as he continued. "During breaks at Bellissimo, You'd read paperback romances hidden behind the service station, historical ones mostly. You kept them in your locker with a spare pair of shoes because your feet would hurt after double shifts. He finally looked up, his dark eyes holding hers. You visited your mother every Tuesday and Thursday morning before work. You'd bring her magazines and sit reading them together until the nurses changed shifts. The detail in his knowledge left her breathless. It wasn't just surveillance, he'd paid attention to the intimate patterns of her life. As breakfast concluded, Julia entered to clear the dishes. Alexandria noticed the housekeeper's demeanor had shifted from initial coldness to something approaching respect. When a delivery arrived carrying fresh flowers, Alexandria watched Julia efficiently distribute them throughout the house. The master has ordered them weekly since before. Julia hesitated, then finished. Since before you came. He was quite specific about the varieties. This casual revelation hit Alexandria hard. More evidence of how long he'd been planning, preparing for her arrival even before she knew he existed. Later that morning, Salvatore announced he had a meeting too dangerous for her to attend. He assigned Antonio to guard her, giving his right-hand man detailed security instructions. Once Salvatore left, Alexandria turned to Antonio. "Show me more of the estate. I've only seen fragments of it." Antonio hesitated but eventually agreed. As they walked the grounds, he gradually opened up about Salvatore's rise to power. He took control young but smart, eliminated the corrupt ones, first uncles and cousins who abused their authority, who hurt innocent people for pleasure rather than business. They passed elaborate gardens as Antonio continued. He has strict rules. No dealing drugs to minors, no human trafficking, ever. Break those rules, you die. Simple as that. He may seem a monster to you, Antonio said, studying her reaction, but he has lines he won't cross, principles he'd die defending. A commotion from the house interrupted them. Salvatore had returned early, his fury at finding Alexandria away from her designated location radiating off him as he strode toward them. Antonio stepped slightly in front of Alexandria, facing his boss's rage. "It was my decision to show her the grounds, sir. Full security protocols were maintained." Alexandria was struck by Antonio's protective stance, this loyal soldier willing to face Salvatore's wrath to shield her. That night, sleep eluded her. Alexandria found herself wandering to Salvatore's study, where he sat reviewing security footage in the dim light. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble for Antonio," she said softly. Salvatore was quiet for a long moment. "He did his job, protecting you." He rubbed his face tiredly. "Perhaps I am. Excessive in my security measures." "Why?" she asked, sensing an opening for honesty. "I was 14 when rival families killed my mother," he said finally. "I watched it happen. Couldn't stop. It. Never again." The raw vulnerability in his voice created a shift between them. Outside, thunder rolled as a storm broke over the estate. Their conversation continued, hours slipping by as Salvatore shared pieces of his past stories of learning to run the family business, of building his empire, of trying to protect those under his care. Alexandria found herself opening up too, telling him about growing up without a father, about protecting her mother through years of illness, about dreams deferred by poverty. The storm raged on as they talked through the night. When exhaustion finally overtook her, Alexandria felt herself drifting off on the study's leather couch. Through half-closed eyes, she saw Salvatore rise, felt strong arms lifting her. He carried her carefully to her bed. As he turned to leave, she caught his wrist. "Thank you," she murmured sleepily, "for telling me about your mother." Salvatore stood watching her, conflict clear in his expression. With unexpected gentleness, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, his blood-stained hands capable of such tender gestures. A week passed like water through Alexandria's fingers. Each morning, she found herself in the basement gym with Salvatore, their training sessions evolving into something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Today was no different, as his solid frame pressed against her back, demonstrating an escape from a rear hold. "Your attacker won't be gentle," he murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "They'll use their full strength." Alexandria tried to focus on the technique, but her body betrayed her, hyper-aware of every point of contact. His chest against her back, arms wrapped around her torso, thighs brushing hers. The scent of his cologne mixed with clean sweat filled her senses. Following his instructions, she shifted her weight, twisted, and used his momentum against him. For the first time, she successfully executed the move, sending him to the mat and following to pin him down. Their faces hovered inches apart, both breathing heavily. His dark eyes dropped to her lips, and time seemed to stretch like taffy. Then Salvatore blinked, the spell broken. He smoothly disentangled himself and stood. Good. That's enough for today. Without another word, he strode from the gym, leaving Alexandria still kneeling on the mat, confusion and something else churning in her stomach. The next few days brought a noticeable shift. Salvatore maintained polite distance, burying himself in endless business calls. He delegated her security to Antonio more frequently, his previous possessiveness replaced by careful avoidance. Alexandria found herself strangely disappointed by his withdrawal. She used her relative freedom to explore previously forbidden areas of the mansion, including his private office, while Antonio was distracted by a security issue. The office smelled of leather and cigarette smoke. She moved carefully, ensuring everything remained exactly as she found it. In the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath files, she discovered a collection of newspaper clippings. Most detailed murders from 12 years ago, but one caught her eye. An article about an unidentified black man found in the Chicago River. The details struck a chord deep in her memory. The victim's estimated height and build, the location where the body was found, the time frame. Her hands trembled as she read. Footsteps in the hallway sent her scrambling to return everything to its place. She barely made it out before Salvatore rounded the corner, his expression unreadable as he passed without acknowledgement. That evening, the mansion buzzed with preparation for a formal family gathering. Alexandria watched staff members transform the dining room into something fit for royalty, while her mind spun with questions about the newspaper clippings. Unable to bear Salvatore's continued coldness, she cornered him in a quiet hallway. "Why are you avoiding me?" "I'm not avoiding you," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "I have business matters requiring attention. You barely look at me anymore. Since the gym..." "Leave it alone, Alexandria." "No." She stepped closer, forcing him to acknowledge her. What changed? Something snapped in his expression. He moved suddenly, backing her against the wall, one hand braced beside her head. "You want to know what changed? I've never wanted anyone the way I want you," he growled. "It's becoming harder to remember why I should keep my hands off what's legally mine." The raw honesty in his voice stole her breath. She watched his control crumble as his gaze dropped to her lips again. This time, he didn't pull away. The first brush of his lips was surprisingly gentle, a question rather than a demand. When she gasped, he took it as invitation, deepening the kiss until the world narrowed to the points where they connected. His hand cupped her face while the other gripped her hip, pulling her closer. Alexandria found herself responding with equal hunger, fingers curling into his shirt. The kiss consumed them both, breaking down carefully constructed walls. Antonio's arrival shattered the moment. "Boss, we have a situation." Salvatore pulled back slowly, his eyes still dark with want. Without a word, he followed Antonio, leaving Alexandria touching her lips in wonder. Later, surrounded by Costello family members, Alexandria's mind still spun with conflicted emotions. How could she want someone who'd essentially kidnapped her? How could she trust these feelings when they began in captivity? Her troubled thoughts were interrupted by fragments of conversation between two elderly women. Salvatore's been obsessed with finding Giuseppe Barone ever since the Johnson case 12 years ago. Alexandria froze. Johnson? Her father's case? She found Donatella in the crowd and pulled her aside. "The Johnson case they mentioned. What do you know about it?" Shock flashed across Donatella's face. She grabbed Alexandria's arm and led her to a private study. "Has Salvatore never told you?" Her expression grew grave. "Your father, Marcus Johnson, worked for the Barone family as an accountant. When he discovered their human trafficking operation and threatened to go to the FBI, they eliminated him." The truth hit Alexandria like a physical blow. Salvatore had known. He'd known exactly who she was all along. Every interaction, every decision took on new meaning as pieces of the puzzle shifted into place. Dawn painted the garden in soft pastels as Alexandria sat on a marble bench, her mind churning with revelations about her father. Dew dampened the hem of her dress, but she barely noticed. Lost in memories of the day her father never came home. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Measured, deliberate steps she'd learned to recognize. Salvatore moved with his usual predatory grace, but something in his expression showed caution as he approached. He settled beside her on the bench, leaving careful space between them. "You know about your father," he said quietly, not a question. Alexandria's hands clenched in her lap. 12 years of wondering what happened to him, watching my mother fall apart, and you knew all along. Yes. His honesty was brutal in its simplicity. "Tell me everything," she demanded. "I deserve the truth." Salvatore turned to face her fully. Your father was an accountant for what appeared to be legitimate Barone family businesses. He was good at his job, noticed discrepancies others missed. Too good, ultimately. He discovered their human trafficking operation through financial records. Young girls smuggled in through shell companies. Alexandria's throat tightened. He was going to expose them? He gathered evidence, threatened to go to the FBI. Giuseppe Baroni ordered his execution before he could. Salvatore's jaw clenched. I was already investigating the Baronis myself. Their trafficking operation violated every code I believe in, but I found out about the hit too late to stop it. But you found his killers, Alexandria said, remembering the newspaper clippings. I hunted down every man involved in your father's murder. Made them suffer before they died. His voice held no apology for the violence. But Giuseppe Barone remained untouchable, protected by corrupt politicians and judges. Alexandria stood abruptly, needing space to process. Is that why you chose me? Part of your vendetta against the Baronis? Salvatore remained seated, his expression carefully controlled. I discovered you while investigating your father's case, but watching you became personal. You worked yourself to exhaustion supporting your mother, never broke despite everything they took from you. Your strength drew me before I ever spoke a word to you. You could have told me the truth from the beginning. Would you have believed anything I said when I first brought you here? He stood now, moving closer. You saw me execute a man. You thought I was a monster. And now? Alexandria challenged, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. Before he could answer, Antonio appeared at the garden entrance, tension evident in his stance. Boss, we have reports of increased Barone activity across the city. They're mobilizing. Salvatore's expression hardened. Gather the captains. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. He turned back to Alexandria as Antonio departed. I'll have annulment papers prepared if you want them. You'll have the freedom to leave, with your mother's care guaranteed regardless of your choice. Alexandria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Salvatore nodded once, accepting her silence, and strode away to handle the emerging threat. Left alone in the massive house, Alexandria found herself drawn to Salvatore's study. The newspaper clippings about her father lay exactly where she'd found them before. This time she examined them more carefully, finding handwritten notes in Salvatore's precise script. Pages of investigation details, witness statements, financial records, years of work seeking justice for a man he'd never met. The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted her reading. Gabriella burst in with Sophia clutching her hand, both looking rattled. There's been an attack on Salvatore's businesses downtown, Gabriella explained, her usual composure cracking slightly. He sent us here for safety while he handles it. Alexandria helped settle them in the family room, trying to ignore the growing knot of worry in her stomach. Hours passed without word from Salvatore. Sophia fell asleep on the couch while Gabriella paced, checking her phone repeatedly. As night fell, the head of security appeared in the doorway. Ma'am, we've detected suspicious activity on the perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. Alexandria surprised herself by taking charge. Initiate lockdown procedures. Get Sophia to the panic room with her mother. Station extra men at all entry points. The security team moved quickly to comply, respecting her authority despite her complicated position in the household. Standing at an upstairs window, watching armed men take defensive positions around the property, Alexandria realized something that terrified her more than any external threat. She was desperately worried about Salvatore's safety. Somewhere in the midst of revelations about her father, vendettas, and criminal empires, she'd developed feelings for the man who'd forced his way into her life. The mansion's security room hummed with tension as Alexandria studied camera feeds alongside Antonio. Her fingers drummed nervously against the desk while she watched perimeter monitors, searching for any sign of Salvatore. Just past midnight, the main gate camera caught movement. He's back, Antonio announced, relief evident in his voice. Alexandria's heart jumped as Salvatore strode through the front door, his pristine suit torn and bloodied. Their eyes met across the security room, and something electric passed between them, mutual relief tinged with lingering tension from their earlier conversation. Without a word, she crossed to him, noting how he favored his left side. You're hurt. It's nothing, he dismissed, but didn't resist when she led him toward their suite. In their bathroom, Alexandria gathered medical supplies, while Salvatore shed his ruined jacket and shirt, revealing a deep knife wound across his shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly as she cleaned the injury, trying to focus on the task rather than their proximity. The Baronis hit multiple locations simultaneously, Salvatore explained, his voice tight as she worked. Lost the warehouse on Canal Street and the nightclub downtown, but their casualties were higher. They're getting desperate. Why now? Alexandria's fingers paused on his skin. They're searching for something important enough to risk open war. His muscles tensed under her touch. Your father's evidence, most likely. The mention of her father brought back all her conflicted emotions. Setting down the gauze, Alexandria met his gaze in the mirror. I need to know something. Did you only marry me because of my connection to his case? Salvatore turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Your father's murder led me to discover you existed, but watching you. He reached up, brushing her cheek with calloused fingers. You worked double shifts without complaint, helped elderly customers who couldn't afford to tip, smiled despite everything life threw at you. I couldn't stop thinking about you. But the witness situation forced my timeline, he admitted. I had planned to approach you differently, court you properly. When you saw Marco's execution, I had to act immediately. You were already planning to make me yours? The possessiveness in his original plan should have angered her, but instead, heat pooled in her stomach. Yes, his thumb traced her lower lip. I've wanted you since the first time I saw you handle an entitled customer with more grace than he deserved. Alexandria's resistance crumbled. She pressed forward, claiming his mouth in a desperate kiss. Salvatore responded immediately, pulling her against him despite his injury. Their first time together was passionate and consuming, equal parts tenderness and intensity that left them both breathless. Morning light found them tangled in sheets, but reality couldn't be ignored forever. Alexandria propped herself up on an elbow, studying his face. If we're doing this, really doing this, I need to be your true partner. No more secrets. No more keeping me in the dark about family business. Salvatore considered her words carefully. Being involved puts you at greater risk. I'm already at risk. At least let me understand what I'm facing. He nodded slowly. There's a family council meeting in an hour. Come with me. The council gathered in Salvatore's private study, capos and senior family members whose expressions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility at Alexandria's presence. When Gabriella's husband started to object, Salvatore silenced him with a single look. The Baronis are searching, Antonio reported, spreading surveillance photos across the desk. Their attacks are covering systematic sweeps of specific neighborhoods. They're looking for whatever evidence Marcus Johnson hid, Salvatore concluded. Something damaging enough to destroy their organization. Alexandria straightened. My father's belongings. After he disappeared, my mother packed everything into storage. We could never afford to sort through it all. Where? Salvatore demanded, already reaching for his phone. Hours later, they stood in her mother's small apartment, Alexandria sorting through dusty boxes while Salvatore posted men outside. Among old tax returns and family photos, she found a folder of coded notes. These? Numbers, she said, showing Salvatore. They don't match any accounts I recognize. He studied the papers intently. Offshore accounts. Shipping manifests disguised as accounting entries. This could expose their entire trafficking operation. Movement caught Alexandria's eye. A dark sedan passing slowly for the third time. Salvatore. He was already moving, pushing her away from the window. Before they could reach their vehicle, gunfire shattered the night. Salvatore shoved her behind a dumpster, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. The firefight was brief but intense. When silence fell, Alexandria emerged to find Salvatore standing over a wounded man in an expensive suit. Blood spread across the man's chest, but he was alive. Take her back to the mansion, Salvatore ordered his men, his voice devoid of emotion. I need information from our friend here. As security escorted her to the car, Alexandria glanced back. Salvatore dragged the wounded Barone soldier into the shadows, his gentle lover's expression replaced by something cold and merciless. A stark reminder of the man she'd first seen executing a traitor in Bellissimo's private dining room. Alexandria's heels clicked against marble floors as she paced the mansion's grand foyer. Dawnlight filtered through towering windows, casting long shadows across antique furnishings that had witnessed generations of Costello secrets. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, knowing what Salvatore was capable of doing to extract information. The massive front door opened at precisely 6:47 a.m. Salvatore strode in, his usual immaculate appearance marred by dried blood on his shirt cuffs. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but triumph radiated from his posture. Without a word, he placed a small flash drive on the entryway table. The Baroni soldier talked. He stated simply, offering no details about his methods. Alexandria's gaze fixed on those bloody cuffs, her stomach churning. What we suspected is true. Your father hid evidence that could destroy them. In his private study, Salvatore explained how Marcus Johnson had created an encrypted insurance file while working as the Barones' accountant. Your father documented everything: names, dates, bank accounts. Most importantly, he recorded which politicians and judges were accepting bribes to look the other way, while the Barones trafficked women and children. Why didn't he go to the FBI? Alexandria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He tried. Found out they had people inside the bureau too. So he created 2 pieces of insurance, physical evidence hidden somewhere only he knew, and an encrypted file as the key to make sense of it all. Salvatore's jaw tightened. The Barones discovered what he'd done, but they never found either piece. That's why they're so interested in anything connected to Marcus now, including you. Alexandria sank into a leather chair, processing this new information about her father. You think I might have access to the evidence somehow? He would have wanted to protect you while ensuring you could access it if necessary. Salvatore's expression softened slightly. What did he give you before he disappeared? They spent the next hour going through Alexandria's childhood mementos, which Salvatore had already retrieved from her mother's apartment. Each item carried memories of her father, his laugh, his warm hugs, his constant encouragement. Near the bottom of a box, she found the music box he'd given her for her 12th birthday, just months before he vanished. He had this custom-made, Alexandria remembered, running her fingers over the intricate wooden inlays. Said it was special, like me. Salvatore took the box, examining it with expert eyes. His fingers found a hidden catch, revealing a concealed compartment containing a small key. Safety deposit box, he said immediately. Specific model used by Geneva Trust in the financial district. Alexandria stood abruptly, remembering. The blood on his cuffs. How many bones did you break to get that information? Salvatore met her gaze steadily. Do you really want to know? I need to know who I'm married to. He approached slowly, like a predator who didn't want to frighten his prey. You're married to a man who will do whatever necessary to protect what's his. The soldier who talked, he helps traffic children. His suffering means nothing to me. And the difference between necessary violence and cruelty? Cruelty is violence for pleasure. I take no pleasure in it. His hand cupped her face, surprisingly gentle. The man you saw last night exists to protect what's mine, and nothing is more mine than you. Before Alexandria could respond, Antonio burst through the study doors without knocking a sign of serious trouble. Barone men spotted at the medical facility, he reported tersely. Watching the mother's room. Salvatore was already moving. Get a transport team ready. We're moving her now. The drive to the hospital was tense, Salvatore coordinating security while Alexandria worried about her mother's fragile condition. They entered through a secure service entrance, taking a freight elevator to minimize exposure. As they approached her mother's room, Alexandria noticed an orderly she didn't recognize. Something about his stance seemed wrong. Her heart jumped into her throat as she spotted a telltale bulge under his scrubs. Gun, she tried to shout, but Salvatore was already moving. He shoved her behind him as the fake orderly drew his weapon. Gunfire exploded in the confined hospital corridor, the sounds deafening. Salvatore returned fire one-handed while keeping Alexandria shielded with his body. Through the chaos, she glimpsed other figures approaching from both ends of the hallway. A bullet caught Salvatore in the side, but he barely flinched as he eliminated the immediate threat. Only when the shooting stopped did he sag against the wall, blood spreading across his pristine white shirt. He pulled Alexandria close, his breath ragged against her ear. Get your mother out. More will come. As if summoned by his words, running footsteps echoed from nearby corridors. Salvatore's security team burst in just as his legs gave out, leaving Alexandria frozen between her wounded husband and her vulnerable mother as the sound of approaching reinforcements grew louder. The steady beep of medical monitors filled the private room as Alexandria maintained her vigil beside Salvatore's bed. The Costello Medical Facility, disguised as an abandoned warehouse on Chicago's north side, had state-of-the-art equipment that rivaled any hospital. For 6 endless hours, she'd watched his chest rise and fall, his normally commanding presence reduced to stillness. Her fingers traced the bandage covering his side where surgeons had removed the bullet. The doctor said he'd been lucky an inch to the left and the damage would have been catastrophic. Still, Salvatore's stubborn constitution had pulled him through the surgery. When his eyelids finally fluttered, Alexandria leaned forward, heart pounding. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Alexandria? I'm here, she said, squeezing his hand. His eyes snapped open, instantly alert despite the medication. Are you hurt? Your mother? We're both safe, she assured him. Antonio got us out while his team handled the Baroni men. Mom's at a new safe house with round-the-clock protection." Salvatore tried to sit up but grimaced. Alexandria pressed him gently back against the pillows. "The doctor said you need to rest." "I've had worse," he muttered, but allowed her to adjust his position. She hadn't left his side since they'd brought him in, coordinating security measures with Antonio via phone. The attack had shaken her deeply, not because of the violence, but because of the terror she'd felt watching Salvatore fall. Somewhere between their forced marriage and now, she'd fallen in love with him, the revelation both frightening and liberating. Against medical advice, Salvatore insisted on returning to the mansion after just 2 days. "I won't appear weak," he said when Alexandria protested. "Our enemies are watching." They found Julia waiting at the mansion entrance, her usually composed face drawn with worry. "Someone breached the study while you were gone," she reported immediately. "The security system prevented access to the safe, but they tried," Salvatore finished, his expression darkening. "Inside job. Has to be." Using her father's key, they drove to Alexandria's old neighborhood, finding the small bank where Marcus Johnson had rented a safety deposit box 12 years ago. The box contained exactly what they'd suspected: detailed documentation of the Barones' ongoing human trafficking operation, complete with dates, locations, and most damaging of all, proof of payoffs to a sitting Chicago judge and state senator. Leaving the bank, Alexandria noticed a black SUV that had passed them twice. "We're being followed." Salvatore immediately changed course, taking an elaborate route that led them not to the mansion but to a nondescript apartment building she'd never seen before. "Safe house," he explained as they entered through a service door. "One that only Antonio knows about." Inside, he revealed his growing suspicion. "Someone in my inner circle has been compromised. The Barones knew too much about our movements." While reviewing the evidence, Alexandria found an envelope with her name written in familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened her father's letter. "My dearest Alexandria," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead. I discovered the Barones' trafficking operation too late. When I threatened to expose them, Giuseppe Baroni himself ordered my execution. I'm so sorry for leaving you, but know that everything I did was to protect you." Tears blurred her vision as she read his final words. Salvatore's hand settled, warm on her shoulder, offering silent support. Later that night, while Salvatore made calls to trusted allies, Alexandria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her blood ran cold as she opened a photo showing her mother's safe house. The message below was simple: "Trade the evidence for her life." "We move now," Salvatore said when she showed him. "My men can extract her before—" "No." Alexandria grabbed his arm. "Any suspicious movement could trigger them to kill her." "I won't lose you both," Salvatore said fiercely, pulling her close. The raw emotion in his voice made her breath catch. Their argument cut short as the safe house plunged into darkness. Salvatore instantly pushed Alexandria behind him, weapon drawn. Footsteps approached from multiple directions. "We've been compromised," he whispered, guiding her toward a hidden exit. They'd almost reached it when the door burst open. Alexandria's heart stopped at the sight of Gabriella pointing a gun at them, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, brother," she choked out. "They have Sophia. I had no choice." Giuseppe Baroni stepped in behind her, surrounded by armed men. He was older than Alexandria expected, with cold eyes and an expensive suit. "Salvatore Costello," he said, smiling without warmth. "Finally, we meet properly." Before Salvatore could move, a heavy blow struck him from behind. Alexandria screamed as he crumpled. Something hard slammed into her head, and her last image was of Barone's men dragging Salvatore's limp body away as darkness claimed her. Alexandria's head throbbed as consciousness returned. Cold concrete walls came into focus, the sparse room illuminated by a single overhead bulb that cast harsh shadows across the grimy floor. Her wrists burned where rope bit into them, secured tightly behind the metal chair, the fibers digging deeper with each subtle movement she attempted. The musty scent of damp and decay filled her nostrils, suggesting she was being held somewhere old and neglected. Giuseppe Barone sat across from her, his expensive suit pristine despite the dingy surroundings. Not a wrinkle marred the Italian silk. Not a speck of dust dared settle on his polished leather shoes. He studied her with the detached interest of someone examining an insect under glass, his cold eyes calculating as they swept over her disheveled appearance. "Your father was a problem for me 12 years ago," he said conversationally, adjusting his gold cufflinks with manicured fingers. "How fitting that his daughter delivers me Salvatore Costello, and the evidence that should have died with Marcus." His voice carried no malice, just the calm certainty of a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Alexandria's stomach churned as Barone detailed Salvatore's current situation, being interrogated in the basement level for information about Costello operations before his planned execution. Each word fell like a hammer blow, the casual way he spoke of torture making it all the more horrifying. Poor Gabriella had no choice, you see, Barone continued, his tone almost sympathetic as he leaned forward slightly. Sophia was so easy to take from her school playground. Children are remarkably trusting, aren't they? Just offer them candy or a lost puppy. His cold smile made Alexandria's skin crawl, goosebumps rising along her arms despite the stuffiness of the room. A mother will do anything to protect her child, even betray her beloved brother. He stood with deliberate slowness, pacing methodically around Alexandria's chair, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. The scent of his expensive cologne sandalwood and something citrusy wafted around her with each pass, an incongruous luxury in this prison. You were always the key, though you didn't know it. We've watched you for years. Certain Marcus must have left the evidence somewhere you could access, when Salvatore suddenly married you. He chuckled, the sound entirely devoid of humor. Well, it confirmed our suspicions. Salvatore Costello doesn't do anything without purpose. Stopping directly in front of her, Barone laid out his offer, hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. Your mother's life and your freedom, in exchange for the evidence and Salvatore's death. Simple, really. He paused, studying her reaction. Think about it. Your mother continues receiving her treatments. You walk away from all this. He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. All it costs is a man who basically kidnapped you and some files your father stupidly died for. After leaving her alone to consider his impossible choice, Alexandria began working her restraints, remembering Salvatore's lessons during their training sessions. The memory of his hands positioning her arms, teaching her escape techniques with patience she'd never expected from him, gave her renewed focus. She could almost hear his deep voice in her ear. Small movements. Use their confidence against them. She managed to shift enough to reach the hairpin in her back pocket, her fingertips scraping painfully against the denim as she strained against her bonds. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked it into the rope's knots, twisting her wrists at an unnatural angle that sent shooting pain up her arms. Each small victory loosened the ropes incrementally, the burning sensation of blood returning to her hands both agony and encouragement. As she worked, sounds of struggle erupted outside, gunshots and shouts echoing through the hallway, the dull thud of bodies hitting walls or floors. Her heart raced, fingers working more frantically now, unsure if the commotion meant rescue or further danger. The door burst open with a crash that made her jump, revealing Antonio with several Costello soldiers behind him. His normally impeccable appearance was marred by a smear of blood across one cheek, his weapon held with the practiced ease of someone who'd used it many times before. Relief flooded through her as he quickly crossed the room and cut her free, the cool blade of his knife slicing through her bonds in one efficient movement. Emergency GPS in your phones, he explained while checking her for injuries, his touch clinical but not unkind. Salvatore had them installed months ago as a precaution. Your mother's already safe at a secure location. Donatella is with her. Where's Salvatore? Alexandria demanded, rubbing her wrists where angry red welts had formed, small droplets of blood appearing where the rope had cut deepest. Basement level. Heavy security. We need to get you out first. Antonio's expression was firm, already positioning himself to guide her toward the exit. No. Alexandria's voice was steel, stronger than she'd expected. She planted her feet firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I'm not leaving without him. While Antonio created a diversion at the main entrance to the basement, drawing the attention of most guards with a carefully orchestrated assault, Alexandria used her smaller frame to advantage. She squeezed through the ventilation system, dust and cobwebs clinging to her hair and clothes as she crawled silently through the narrow space, following the sound of voices until she located Salvatore's position. Through the vent grating, she saw him bloodied but conscious, his usually immaculate appearance destroyed by hours of interrogation. One eye was swollen shut, dried blood caked at the corner of his mouth, yet the defiance in his remaining good eye burned undiminished. 2 armed guards stood watch, their weapons casually held, clearly not expecting an attack from above. Years of waitressing had taught her to move silently, to navigate spaces without drawing attention. She carefully removed the grating, easing it aside without a sound. She dropped down behind the first guard, using the technique Salvatore had drilled into her to take him down before he could shout a sharp strike to the throat, followed by a precise blow to the temple, just as he'd shown her countless times in the training room. The second guard spotted her, eyes widening in surprise, but those precious seconds of shock gave Salvatore time to break his own restraints. Together, they subdued the remaining guard, Salvatore moving with lethal efficiency despite his injuries, his body functioning on instinct and training even as pain etched deep lines around his mouth. "You should be safely away from here," Salvatore growled, even as his hands gently checked her for injuries, fingers trembling slightly as they traced her face, her arms, confirming she was whole. "So should you," she countered, supporting his weight as he leaned against her, helping him toward the exit. She could feel warm blood seeping through his shirt, where hidden injuries hadn't yet clotted. Costello reinforcements pushed in from above, filling the compound with gunfire and controlled explosions. The air grew thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. In the chaos, Alexandria lost grip of Salvatore's hand as they rounded a corner, bodies pushing between them in the narrow corridor. She found herself in a narrow passageway face-to-face with Giuseppe Baroni, attempting to escape through a concealed tunnel. His expensive suit was now disheveled, a far cry from his earlier immaculate appearance. His gun raised toward her chest, hand steady despite the pandemonium surrounding them. "Fitting end to the Johnson bloodline," he sneered, finger tightening on the trigger. His eyes held no regret, just the cold calculation of a man eliminating an inconvenience. "Drop it." Salvatore's cold voice came from behind him, his own weapon pressed to Baroni's head. Despite his injuries, his hand remained perfectly steady. "Your empire ends tonight." The words carried the weight of years of hatred, of a vendetta finally reaching its conclusion. Alexandria's hand shot out as Salvatore's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wait," she said, firmly, surprising herself with her own conviction. "He doesn't deserve a quick death. The evidence goes to the FBI. Let him face justice for trafficking. Let him spend decades in prison, knowing every day that he failed." Baroni's bitter laugh echoed in the tunnel, bouncing off the concrete walls. "The system's too corrupt to touch me. I own too many judges, too many politicians. You're naive, just like your father." "Perhaps," Salvatore agreed, his eyes meeting Alexandria's with unexpected understanding, something soft momentarily replacing the rage. "But I've learned from the woman I love that some vengeance requires patience. That true justice isn't always delivered at the end of a gun." His pistol cracked against Barone's skull with calculated force, dropping the older man unconscious rather than dead, blood immediately beginning to trickle from the wound. Outside the burning compound, police sirens wailed in the distance, their lights painting the night sky in alternating red and blue. Salvatore pulled Alexandria close, his heartbeat strong against her cheek despite everything he'd endured. "I never expected to find redemption," he murmured into her hair, his voice rough with emotion usually kept tightly controlled. Alexandria pressed closer, breathing in his familiar scent mixed with smoke and gunpowder. Her father's evidence would ensure justice, but more importantly, she'd found unexpected love in the darkest circumstances. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. They both carried scars, visible and invisible, but they would face it together. Standing in Salvatore's embrace, as flames consumed the Barone compound, she finally felt the missing pieces of her life sliding into place. The night sky above them seemed to brighten, not just with fire but with possibility, as if the universe itself acknowledged their unlikely union, forged in blood and danger but tempered with something stronger love that had survived the most impossible circumstances.